The Jeep Wrangler versus the Ford Bronco. We'll drive through and see how each SUV evolved in technology and style, along with some fun backstories and side stories along the way. So hop in and let's go for a ride. It was 1944. World War II was coming to a close. This meant that less Willys MBs, the U.S. Army truck, would be needed, so a civilian version was born. It was named the Civilian Jeep, or CJ. The CJ differed from the military grade because it had a canvas top, a tailgate, lower gearing, and a spare tire that was mounted on the side. The only feature the CJ retained from the military version was the fold-down windshield, which remains even to this day. Have you ever noticed how Jeep owners exchange friendly waves with each other or make the casual two-finger peace sign on a steering wheel? It's almost like they're in a secret society or community that just doesn't exist among other car owners. Well, it goes back to its military roots. The story goes that the Jeep wave started during World War II when service members passed an ally. After the wars, vets who drove the civilian Jeeps continued using the sign. It became the tradition and was carried to the 1970s when off-roading became popular. Today, even non-vets who own Jeeps have the privilege of exchanging the friendly Jeep wave with other kindred spirits. But back to our story. It's the 1960s. Ford wanted a piece of the SUV market, so they started developing its first ever compact SUV using its own chassis. It was called the Bronco, and it was initially meant to compete with the Jeep CJ5 and the International Harvester Scout. The Bronco was the brainchild of Donald Frey, who also conceived the Ford Mustang. It was powered by Ford's proven 170 cubic inch overhead valve 6-cylinder engine that generated a whopping 105 horsepower at 4,400 RPM. Its base price? Less than $2,200. And Ford sold almost 24,000 Broncos in its first year. After a 10-year run, Ford redesigned the Bronco. The second generation Bronco came with 3 doors, a removable hardtop, and a rear window that lowered onto the door, which was novel at the time. It was based on the F100 full-size pickup. The Bronco was 2 feet longer, 10 inches wider, 5 inches taller, and the only resemblance to the previous generation Bronco seemed to be its name. It was so popular that some customers had to wait 6 months to get a hold of one. But since the second generation was large and top-heavy, it had a high rollover risk. Ford quickly discontinued this generation due to the number of deaths. So back to the drawing board. Ford redesigned the Bronco and introduced the third generation. It was developed alongside Ford's all-new F-150 pickup. This Bronco was shorter, narrower, and lighter. This was the first Bronco with independent front suspension for better front wheel control. It was also the first Bronco to come with the blue oval Ford logo rather than the letters of Ford spelled out at the front. Meanwhile, at the Jeep camp the same year, the popular TV show 60 Minutes alleged that the civilian Jeep was unsafe with a high risk of rollover. But after some 400 trials spanning several years, the CJ experienced only 8 rollovers, and those 8 were evidently due to bad tires. But the damage to the brand name and image was already done and irreversible. Around the same period, Ford had introduced the compact 2-door Bronco II to combat the rise in gas prices. It was a mini-me version of the Bronco. It was 19 inches shorter, 9 inches skinnier, and 5 inches lower. But the Bronco II was involved in some rollover crashes, and about 260 people died. Ford faced expensive lawsuits and public safety concerns. So Ford went back to the drawing board again. This time they introduced its 4th generation Bronco. It was the same year Ford released the new F-150, so the new Bronco shared similar updates. This generation Bronco was rounder and had wraparound headlights and bumpers. And while its engine and drivetrain remained largely unchanged, it looked like an SUV instead of the F-Series pickup. And it had major safety advancements, including rear anti-lock brakes. That same year, with the civilian Jeep image having been tarnished, it was rebranded and redesigned. That's how the Jeep Wrangler YJ was born. The second generation Jeep shared some technology and design from the Jeep Cherokee, including anti-roll bars and suspension upgrades. This generation was a bit safer and offered more comfort. The public now considered the Wrangler not just an off-roader, but also a car for everyday use. And it came with straighter lines, most noticeably the square headlights similar to the Bronco. But die-hard Jeep fans hated the new square headlights. Back at the Ford camp, Ford decided to remove the removable hardtop feature. The 5th generation Bronco came with a fixed roof. This generation made headlines because of the infamous O.J. Simpson car chase. Sadly, Ford discontinued the Bronco soon after. Some believe it was due to bad publicity, but actually it was because the 2-door Bronco couldn't compete with the 4-door SUV market that was now even more popular. Ford retired the Bronco to make way for the 4-door Expedition. In the meantime, in efforts to cater to its loyal fan base, the 1995 Wrangler YJ saw the removal of the rectangular headlights and the revival of the classic round headlights that Jeep fans love. And so the Jeep Wrangler returned to its roots. The redesign required extra time and investment. That's why there was no 1996 Wrangler ever made, because Chrysler had to skip that model year. So if anyone tries to sell you a 1996 Wrangler, well, then just know something is amiss. The result of the redesign was the 3rd generation Wrangler TJ. It had coil spring suspension borrowed from the Jeep Grand Cherokee and safety upgrades including airbags. The frame and body got reinforced to reduce flex and increase strength. This generation also saw the very first Rubicon trim with heavy-duty suspension components. It was named after the Rubicon Trail in the Sierra Nevada, just outside of Lake Tahoe, which is a 22-mile off-road adventure that typically takes experienced off-roaders 5 hours to complete. By the way, most people today recognize the Jeep by its trademark 7-slot grille with integrated round headlights. But did you know that the 7-slot grille was once 13? That was in the original 1940 design. And actually, Ford was responsible for the original grille design. But a year later, the number of slots got reduced to 9 and ultimately went down to 7, which is a trademark Jeep look everyone knows today. And there's more to the grille story. It turns out that the grille is a touchy top. When the Hummer H2 was released, it had 7 slots on its chrome grille, similar to the Wrangler. In 2001, Chrysler and GM sued each other over the design similarity, and things got absurdly heated. One GM spokesman even quipped that comparing the Humvee's grille to a Jeep was like saying Arnold Schwarzenegger looks like Mr. Rogers just because both of them have nice smiles. Well, you can guess which vehicle they were calling muscle as opposed to friendly neighbor. Anyway, a year later, the U.S. District Court of Appeals ruled in favor of the Hummer. The court said that if Chrysler truly had been threatened by the H2's grille, well, they should have sued when H1 was first released. The court decision was also based on the fact that Jeep and Hummer shared a history together, so in actuality, nothing had been stolen. Speaking of which, how is the Hummer a kind of Jeep? The original Humvee was a military vehicle. No surprise there. It was initially developed by a division within Jeep before it got sold off. That's why the civilian H1, H2, and H3 share a similar slotted grille as the Wrangler. But back to the Jeep story. The 2007 Wrangler JK marked the start of the 4th generation. It was 5 inches fatter, and it was now offered as a 4-door as well as a 2-door, so more space for cabin and cargo. It also had stability control that made the Wrangler safer. Jeep also introduced new plastic front fenders, but that feature divided its fan base yet again. Did you know that the Jeep Wrangler JK came available with a shade that was initially inspired by a trash can? First started with a literal trash can that was at the Jeep design studio. It must have been one fancy trash can because it caught their eyes. And Jeep first colored the mighty forward control FC concept vehicle with the anvil shade. But it was so popular that Jeep carried that shade over to the Jeep Wrangler JK. A few years later, America saw the 5th generation with the 2018 Wrangler JL. This was the current generation of the Wrangler that we see on the roads today. It's a few inches taller and a bit fatter, and it focuses more on comfort, convenience, and practicality. The old soft top got upgraded from zippers to locking channels, and the windshield has less bolts now. All this to make these parts much easier to remove. The Wrangler JL comes with a 6-speed manual or 8-speed automatic transmission. Did you know that more than 12 years ago, Chrysler was working on a Wrangler EV? They first unveiled the electric off-roader in 2008, but the project got killed when Fiat bought Chrysler the following year. But in more recent years, the project got a green light. Recently, they introduced the 2021 Wrangler plug-in hybrid called the 4xe. And that brings us today. The Ford Bronco is back after a 25-year hiatus, kick-starting the 6th generation with much fanfare. Ford presents the latest Bronco as having the toughness of an F-150 and the spirit of a Mustang. We're talking all-new 7-speed manual transmission, removable top and doors, optional 35-inch tires, optional pull-out table for rear area. It's available as a 2-door or 4-door with options for a 270 horsepower, 2.3-liter EcoBoost 4-cylinder, or a 2.7-liter EcoBoost V6 that punches out 310 horsepower. Both the Ford Bronco and Jeep Wrangler have a lot of history and they've made their own marks in American culture. But now, you tell me, what do you like more, the Bronco or the Wrangler, and why? Please comment below and share your story. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel. Thanks for your support.